What's up, guys? Welcome to the Contractor Commute. Today, we're going to talk about when and how to hire an office manager. We'll hit on admins as well. Excited to go into this episode. We've done another episode, I think it was episode 45, where we talked about when to hire your first person. And so this kind of goes along with that a little bit. We'll link to that in the description as well, just so that way it's easy access for people who are listening to this. But you might find some more valuable tips in that one as well. But we'll jump into our comment of the day. So we had a customer that we were talking with over the weekend, actually. And he said, I'm going to read that quote and then we can kind of break it down. He said, at the end of the day, I need to hire an admin to be in the office for me so I can be in the field. Half the battle is just getting into the office. The other half is training someone to do the office tasks, no matter how easy the task is. I still have to sit down and do it or pay someone to do it for me.
Yeah.
Such a huge dilemma, I feel like. And, when a company gets to a point to where, hiring somebody new is like, you're kind of on the borderline of, hey, does it make sense to hire somebody or does it not? So kind of break down a perspective.
Well, I've lived through this, so I definitely can identify with growing from a spot where you definitely don't want an office manager that's just a drain on your resources to feeling like, well, maybe I do, to definitely you do. And I think this customer is in that spot where he's like on the fence, where he knows where his unique ability, his skill is at, and that's in the field. He's out there doing things, he's crushing it, and he's feeling like the office work is a distraction from that. So it's like his ability to, get stuff done is being hindered by all of this other stuff that just has to get done. And I think it's the easy task, the data entry, the invoicing, all of the miscellaneous, you got insurance audits and expense, receipts and all of these things that you just have to do. Somebody's got to do or don't do.
Right.
You can just skip it and then reap the consequences of that too. Yeah. And then in order to replicate himself, I think he's feeling the pain of that, of being like, wow, this is an intense effort to invest into somebody in order to get to them to the point. So I get it. I've been there. Yeah. I've hired multiple office managers and it's not an easy process.
Yeah. I think one thing to note, one call out and just like pat on the back is like the fact that you're a unique ability. That's a start there. Mm-hmm. What are you great at before you actually decide what somebody else can be great at or that you're poor at, define that. So let's jump into it. What do you need, or when do you need an office manager? Maybe you can break that down for us. When should our customer, when should, anybody who's kind of on that borderline of scaling their business or, has just time suck of like, hey, I don't have enough time in the day to get to all these tasks. When do you need an office manager?
When you're bogged down and you can't do the things you're good at, and I think most of us recognize, if I only did more of this one particular thing, my business would be better. And that's the thing that keeps you from that. Or you're bogged down with a bunch of things that are really not your skill set. It's just being like, man, if it comes out to sales or fulfillment or project management, and those are the things you want to do and you're good at, and you're just saying, man, this accounting stuff and financial stuff and all the back end work, man, I hate that. So many people tell us that, right? You're like, my goodness, I'd rather not have to do that. Mm-hmm. You might need an office manager. But I think there's also an element, we'll get to this a little bit later too, of your business has to be able to support that role as well. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think the other piece is, do you need an assistant or do you need a manager?
Yeah. So what's the difference?
Well, an assistant is somebody that you can more or less nurture and train to do the things you need them to do. They're more or less directed. Do this thing, go pick this up for me, go do this for me, enter these things. A manager is somebody that's saying, I'm delegating the ownership to you to manage the office, meaning you take care of these specific things. It's a very clear job description, and it's more or less, obviously you have some accountability, you have connection, you have communication, but you're not training the person.
Yeah, you don't need quite as much guidance.
So don't hire an office manager that is an assistant or has the skills of an assistant.
Yeah.
So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So let's talk about roles.
Yeah. So what's the role of an office manager then? How would you define that?
Well, and there's definitely some variation here. In my experience with it, an office manager needs to be somebody without too broad of a role. And sometimes it just depends on what your needs are. But typically this is somebody's got to answer the phone, the text messages, the emails, all of the things that are the communication, the public face of your business. Then there's all of the organization. We're becoming more and more digital, so there's less like file cabinets, but nonetheless, there's definitely an element of organizing digital files,
Sure.
whether that's in an app like ours or something else where you're saying, okay, all of the files for this project, the photos need to be uploaded, workflows, calendar management, another aspect of it, takes a lot of time. And then scheduling, work orders. There's definitely an HR role to this as well, right?
Okay.
I mean, hiring people, onboarding people. If you had to terminate somebody, making sure all the paperwork's done for that.
Right.
What else we got? Work orders, potential if you're doing that type of thing, timesheets, and then all of the data entry things like financial data, receipts, expenses. And I think what you're seeing in all this too is this could be more than one role.
Sounds like a lot. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
But in a small business, these are not necessarily, there's only so many receipts to enter.
Sure.
So it's not
Good
a
point.
full-time role.
Good
It's
point.
not a data entry person in the financial department. It's not an accountant because there's not enough things going on there. The same thing with HR. It's not a full-time HR person. So that person, as long as there's a process defined,
Sure.
they can handle some of that stuff.
There's less volume, so
Right.
therefore can have a little bit more variety.
Yep. Insurance audits, safety coordination. Sometimes you have safety training for your guys. Make sure that stuff happens. Obviously, you don't delegate the training itself
Sure.
to somebody that doesn't have
Doesn't
that
know
experience,
how-
right?
how to train.
Let's see how that works out. You train the guys, will you? Yeah. And then I think a very highly skilled person can handle so many things and has the abilities to be adaptable depending on what your business needs.
Yeah, I think it'd be important to call out some of the things that an office manager isn't, because there's probably a tendency to hire somebody that it's like, hey, I can do everything. We've used the terminology before of a unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
Unicorns actually don't exist. And sometimes with hiring, we can wish they did.
Yep.
So what are some things that office managers aren't, so you can just know that going into it?
Yeah, and I have had to learn some of this the hard way because the dream is, great, so much responsibility. I can just delegate to somebody. I won't have to worry about that. And then the reality is that person's not your accountant. And they're also not typically qualified to make high-level decisions for you. Like
Sure.
that responsibility is going to fall on you. They're not your strategist in a sense of planning things necessarily. They're going to be able to execute on well-defined processes. This is the way things should be done. Sometimes they're going to make recommendations, but they're not the one that's the strategist for you. That's your job
Right.
as this business owner. Or you need coaching or somebody that can help you build that strategy out. They're not your coach. They're not your mentor. That doesn't work.
It sounds like you have experience where
Well, I don't know if they try to be my mentor, but I think nonetheless, though, if you hire somebody that feels like it's their responsibility to tell you how to run your business, I'm not talking about being arrogant where you can't take suggestions from somebody, but if you hire an office manager with the expectation that they're going to tell you how to run your business, that can be problematic because you're giving them a lot of doing responsibilities, but you're also giving them sort of like this oversight role of like
vision, really.
Yes. And the vision might not be what your vision is.
Yeah.
We could do this. And next thing you have all this negative energy between you and that person that doesn't need to be there. So don't expect to have a unicorn. Don't, the office manager is not your babysitter, not your project manager, accountant,
estimator,
all
the things.
Right. Getting out in the field and doing work with you. I mean, like this role needs a very clear definition around these are the things we need you to do. And that person has experience in those things.
Yeah. I think on on the episode 45, where we talked about hiring your first person too, just one call out in hiring, for a role is just make sure you're not hiring for projects. You're hiring for a role, a consistent role, something that like fills enough time to be either a part-time or full-time job. That's just a call out there.
Yeah. And I think we've definitely had a lot of experience in that too, where we had,
Sure.
oh, wow, we need somebody to do this thing. And then you get done with it and you realize, well, that wasn't a job description. That was just finish this project and we're done with you. We could have just subcontracted that.
Yeah. Would have been saved more money.
Yeah. And maybe just jumping ahead, but I know as we're prepping for the show, we were thinking about all of this, like the whole role-based thing as well. And sometimes things have stacked up over time where it creates this false sense of need that's not there. For instance, you're a month behind on invoicing and you're thinking, okay, if I only had somebody to do invoicing, well, you realize once you get caught up on that, really it only takes half an hour a week to do that. And so you think you have this huge role of all these, estimates and invoices and accounting work, and all you really has happened in your business is you've stacked up a backlog of work that really could have been kept up with 2 hours a week. And so then you hire a full-time person, they get all into it, and pretty soon they're just putzing around and just trying to create work as opposed to like a very focused job description. So we'll jump into that here in a bit and how to determine what that should look like.
It's good.
one of the things that it probably is going to sound a little controversial, but if you don't know what you're doing before you hire an office manager, hiring an office manager, you're still not going to know what you're doing. And I think it's almost like you're just going to be paying someone and sapping your resources, and you're just going to and they're going to be frustrated with you, and it's just going to be a mess.
It's like getting married, thinking that it's going to solve all of your problems
Right.
that you had when you were dating or engaged.
Yeah. All the single person problems just go away. Just get married.
Like actually they get worse.
Yeah.
So
Now you have somebody that's holding you accountable for all the problems.
I don't have that experience, but
Right. Yeah.
I've heard that happens
Yeah.
a lot.
I've married an incredibly patient
Yeah.
wife, and so she's definitely not that person. But nonetheless, you bring up an interesting point.
So what's the expected impact on the contractor, as a business owner in the business itself? Like what can they actually expect? What should the impact be?
So I think having some realistic expectations can be key here, because we talk about the unicorn conversation. The all-in-one, do it all, doesn't matter. Sometimes we need to identify, we need 3 different roles. We need 4 different roles. I need a project manager. I need an office manager. I need some more help in the field. I need an apprentice. And I also need an accountant. And so instead of thinking I'm going to hire one person and they're going to tackle all of those things, you realize, okay, as my business scales, I have some openings that I'll have in the future. But right now, an office manager is going to fulfill these things.
Sure.
We'll start part-time. They're going to do these things. They have a clear job description, clear ownership, clear experiences to support it. So I think when we talk about impact, if you hire this office manager, it's like, what's the ideal result?
Sure.
What do they bring to your business? What are you looking for? If you don't have enough time, you're not seeing your family, maybe that's the thing that you need.
Sure.
And so the result, the impact would be, I'm going to have more time. Stress, less stress.
Less stress, hopefully.
I need more stress.
Maybe short-term stress.
Yeah, right.
And
There
the
could be
goal
that.
is less stress.
Yes. Maybe the customer experience is lacking. You're not able to respond to people fast enough, and you feel like, man, it's taking me days to get in touch with people. I can't get estimates out fast enough, and that's the thing I need to be able to do, but I'm bogged down by paperwork. If somebody else was, able to do that, then I would have the ability to get my estimates out faster.
And then scale too, right? Like you need to be able to grow your business. If your goal is to grow and continue scaling versus time, I think it's, at a minimum, it's either like, do you want more time or do you want to scale or grow your business? And hiring someone can impact those both positively or negatively.
Yep.
And so if your goal is to scale, then you need to, one, define what is it specifically that you're great at that you can offload and actually delegate to somebody else, so that way you can focus more time on the things that you're great at, which in turn should scale your business.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And I think inevitably, if you can't scale your business, then it brings a big question mark around expanding the roles in your business, unless you have this massive profit margin that you need to share with somebody.
Sure.
And you're like, you know what? I'm right now working 90 hours a week and I'm making $200,000 a year. And so therefore, I don't mind working less, making less money, and splitting that with somebody else.
That's a good call. So let's talk about first steps. Where can you go? What are the first steps to really going down the path?
We talked earlier about understanding that you could have this backlog of work. And I think keeping track of where your time is going is the first step you need to start with. Is just keep a log. Where's your day going? I'm spending 3 hours a day doing this, 4 hours a day doing this. And it'll surprise you sometimes of how little time you're doing the things that you think you need somebody else to do. And if that's the case, maybe you're down the wrong trail of who you need to hire. Sometimes you're saying, man, that paperwork is just eating me up. I'm spending so much time doing it. And then when you add it all up, you say, I spend 4 hours a week doing that. That's not the problem then.
Yeah.
And so I think really identifying where is the problem and troubleshooting that, you need time tracking. So do some logging. I know it's a pain, but keep a notepad and just say, okay, I'm spending most of my time doing this thing. And I love doing that, but I'm getting bogged down by 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours a week of whatever the other things are. So time tracking is important, so you know where the time's going. And I've challenged people on our team here as well to be like, when they're struggling with something, of just saying, okay, log your time. Where's it going? And it's surprising to me where my time goes.
Yeah.
The next thing is what's not getting done too. Sometimes just because you're tracking your time doesn't mean that everything that needs to be done is in that list. Sometimes things get dropped because you don't have time to do them. So what's not getting done that's important as well to get on the list as well. And that will help you get to a clear job description of being, okay, these are the 3 things, these are the 6 things, the 12 things that I need done. And now I can build a job description or descriptions. Depending, you need 2 people. And then you can say, okay, now this is the skill set I need from somebody in order to succeed in that role. And this is something I've learned the hard way. I've hired office managers with this unicorn mentality of being like, I have a bunch of paperwork, we'll figure it out later. I need somebody to help out in the office. And I'm thinking to myself, the impact of just this kind of hypothetical impact as opposed to a very specific, this person does these things and this is the impact, they save me this much time.
Yeah.
And if you don't go into that, I've had the person just sitting in the office, really having a 6 to 10 hour a week job, and I'm paying them for 40. And in the meantime, the other 30 hours, they're trying to optimize my life in ways that I don't need optimized.
That aren't optimizing.
Exactly. Like, because they want to create value.
Yeah. Well, and then you're the blocker to them. So then they're frustrated, right?
That's a good point.
That you're not
good
able
point.
to get feedback to them or whatever because it's not a priority for you.
Yeah, like that's a great point.
Random thought that just came up. We didn't talk about this when we were prepping for the podcast either. Let's say you're, one-man show and you're like, hey, I need to hire somebody. What's your take on needing an office space or a place that an office manager, assistant, whatever can work out of versus remote help?
Yeah, I've liked the office space concept in all of my construction business and side of things. Probably 2 to 3 years into it is when I did an office. And what I did was I rented a warehouse / office space. There was about 300 square feet in the front, 800 square feet in the back of shop space. We had a spot to securely store all the tools, and we had 2 offices up in front. One for you could meet with a customer, they could sign a contract, and one little office space. It worked out great. You don't need anything fancy. It was $800 a month and had a spot for everything. Nice. It tells your customer you're planted. You're not just fly by night. And $800 a month is sometimes something to be, that's expensive. But for me, I felt like having a spot where you could go to work and then go home is important too.
Yeah.
If work is if you're never off work, you just go home and work comes with you. That's the other challenge with it as well. Because if you're working a lot, it'll be very apparent. Like I'm coming home at 9 p.m. while I'm working a ton.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. Yeah. And maybe you don't need it in every business context. And I can think of a lot of businesses where an office space is not important.
Well, and it probably depends on the person who's hiring too. How tech savvy are you? How much communication can you have, remotely with that person? How tech savvy is a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think.
The accountability piece as well of when you have somebody in an office, are they there? Are they doing things is important too, right? I mean, if they're just home, are they working? I don't know. I mean, not that you wouldn't be distrustful of somebody, but it's more or less being like they have clear, I come in on the office on Mondays as opposed to constantly being at work for them too.
Sure.
Like, hey, where's that thing? It's like, well, on Monday, I'm going to take care of that. If it's a part-time job, then it's a part-time role is defined by when you show up and when they're working.
For sure.
But I could see reasons why somebody want to be flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, so let's break down what's the impact to overhead, right? We've talked about overhead. We've had episodes on overhead. Make sure you go listen to that because you have to understand your overhead as a business. So when you're looking at hiring somebody new, how will that impact your overhead?
Well, I think looking at your sales numbers is really important. If you're doing $1 million in sales, which I don't think you should really bring on an office manager, surely not full-time unless you're doing over that in sales. But also that might be the person that facilitates the next jump for you. But I think, let's just say you're paying somebody full-time, $40,000 a year salary, you make $1 million a year in sales, that's 4% of your business's revenue going to your office manager.
Right. So
every dollar $4 out of every $100 you sell goes to your office manager. That's a big thing to carry.
It's a big chunk.
Yeah. Now it could be worth it, but understanding that, okay, what you were charging before now has to be factored into your overhead. Now we have some, like you said, overhead episode. I don't want to bog everybody down with overhead calculations in this episode, but nonetheless, it has to be factored into the equation.
Yeah.
Because you can really I missed it. Yeah. I hired an estimator, a project manager, an office manager, and I was like, where's all the money?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, they're taking it home.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing just to call out, and definitely go listen to that overhead episode if you don't know what your overhead is, break that down, actually do the math to figure it out for your business. You've got to know where you're at. But the salary is not the only expense, or cost to your business. Yeah. There's labor burden, there's benefits if you offer benefits, things like that. So you don't want to forget those details either. And so super, super important before you promise a $40,000 a year salary and, benefits. Make sure you know
Sam, what was the comment on the overhead episode?
Break it down, bro. It was break it down for me, bro.
Oh, break it down.
We tried.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and I think that's That's why we want to work on an overhead calculator, because
Yeah.
it's a fluid calculation, and it goes up, it goes down as your efficiency improves as a business. The overhead ratio goes down. Anyway, it's not easy. So I did like the comment, be like, "Whoa, bro! Like, listen, there's way too many numbers.
It's way too complicated. It is
make
complicated.
it simple.
Break it down, bro.
Yeah, there's some temptations on hiring cheap to try to prevent the overhead ballooning as well. I'll hire somebody I know. They'll work, a couple hours a week.
I think this happens a lot in this space specifically too. So it's a good call out.
Yeah. Friends, family, spouse. And I think the thing that I think stands out to me most acutely in the friends and family I've hired is there's relationship outside of the work relationship. And sometimes that's way more important than working with somebody. I'll give you an example. My brother and I worked together for years. And he's 11 years younger than me. And I love, he's 11 years younger. And I love my little brother way, way more than I would care about our professional relationship. And so protecting that is something that's sometimes a struggle, because there's an accountability piece of like, why is this not done? Or, you're trying to coach somebody to help them level up. It can seem very personal. And so you hire your spouse to be your office manager, and you're telling him, why did this not happen? Or, that could be very personal.
How do you hold each other accountable when you
Drop
love each other?
Right. There's a big deal there. Yeah. And so sometimes that's just not worth it.
Yeah.
And how do you fire somebody you care about too?
Totally.
Like, you can't just tell them, listen, I'm done with this.
Right.
Do they have the right experience, a skill? Can you work together, the right personality? These are really big questions to ask. So don't go easy. Don't go for the shortcut.
Yeah.
And say, well, they're available, because it could be more costly than just hiring somebody.
Yeah, great point. So how do you hire an office manager? How do you hire them?
Yeah.
How do you hire them?
It's like any other role. Obviously, there's the experience piece. Do they have the proven experience? You don't want to be the guinea pig. Yeah. The test case where they gather all that experience. It's very painful. Experience is tough. All the experiences that I've built in life, some of them came very hard. Like they're not experience is not easy or fun to build.
Well, the things you learn are typically the things you failed at, or
good point.
So if you meet somebody that knows a lot, they probably failed a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. So then there's a personality piece as well. You gotta want to work with that person. A friend of mine, he hired somebody for a management role. I think it was an office manager, and he said that the personality piece, like, it was just miserable working together. They didn't enjoy working together one little bit. I think it's something to call out, of being like, you want to be able to work with that person. Do they have the right character? Obviously, clearly. Are they honest? They have integrity? Are they somebody that you trust? Yeah. And so, when you're vetting somebody, do they have experience? Do they have the personality, the character, the competence to be able to have that, and to really not just be okay, but to really win in that role? So let's just assume that we think they do,
because people are very good at selling.
Oh my, yeah, boy, oh boy, this will be the best hire ever. And I've probably at this point hired about 350 people and hired a great number of them, fired a great number of them, hired all of them. So hard. Anyway, and I think there's definitely a learning aspect of this as well. And they're different businesses and different roles. Some of them are professional roles, some of them are construction
Exited
roles.
And, not all.
Yeah, right. I know.
It makes you sound heartless and a terrible person.
I really have a hard time wanting to fire people, and I think I can let people know that it's actually sometimes more heartless to keep somebody than let them go, because they're miserable too. Yeah. So a lot of times, you have somebody that's in the wrong role, and you have expectations of them, and they're frustrated by you being frustrated. Sure. And that can be difficult as well. So one thing we've discovered works really well is prior to hire.
Nice.
There we go. Prior to hire. We do skills testing. And instead of just giving them a test saying, go fill this out, it's real world examples of the things they would be doing. I heard the bartender example, like, go have them mix drinks. It's going to, before you give them a job, can they do the job? And so it's like, if you have an office manager, have them build out a calendar, have them manage email, have them write something. And are they competent? Can they do that? Yeah. And if it's that has prevented us from some bad hires.
Really has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Delegate out a project that's
Yep.
specific to the role. It could even, I mean, you could even be okay with trashing what they submit or
Yep.
accepting it,
Yep.
and you could even pay them for it, for
Yep.
the project. So they
We had
take
an
it seriously.
engineering role. We
Mhm.
had a project in 2 days into it, complete fail. And we're like, well, this is clearly not the right hire. And we
Not
could have
gonna
gone
work.
on a month for it without really being the wiser. But that
Mhm.
skills challenge let us know this is not a good fit
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
So yeah, you want to be able to have a pre-hire skills challenge.
And that's office and field,
100%.
for contractors. That's not just
Yep.
not just office.
Rules to live by.
Mhm.
And then within the first 2 to 3 days, you want to have the feeling that you've made a smart hire.
Mhm.
You're like, I mean, they're efficient, they're on the ball, they're smart. You like working with them. Like, this is not something you sort of acclimate to over the course of a month. You should know in the first 2 to 3 days, I like this person a lot, because it needs to get, like, you don't assume it's going to get better. A lot of times it gets worse from there. And so I think that comes out in the first 2 to 3 days. I have never had a situation yet where I've hired somebody and in the first 2 to 3 days, things improved dramatically. They've always got worse. Then, I mean, there's a sense in which somebody's gained skills and experience and done better. But
Sure.
when somebody was like, oh man, this is off. Like, if it's
You
off,
felt off immediately.
that's what I
and
mean
then-
to say.
Yeah.
If it's off in the first 2 to 3 days, it
Yeah,
doesn't
there you
get
go.
better.
There
That's
you
what I'm
go.
trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like people don't get better over
Yeah.
time.
I was
It's
like,
like
I think
when they're
people
bad.
don't
Yeah, don't give people a shot. It's the bottom line. No, I'm not.
Hence the 350. I'm teasing.
Yeah. And some phenomenal people
Yeah.
that I've had the privilege of working with. And I
Mhm.
think a part of it is just when you have that, I remember hiring a painter one time, and the first couple of days, just everything was wrong. And it was just like, and I stuck it out for another 3 weeks. And I was like, oh my goodness, why didn't I just not
Yeah.
call this when I
Yeah.
saw it right
Yeah.
in the first couple of days?
You paid more than his salary for 3 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a guy
Mistakes.
where I might have shared this on the podcast before, but he actually became almost like a 4-letter word, like so-and-so messed up again, So about 2 weeks after hire, 3 weeks after hire, I said, this is not a good fit. And I was trying to be kind about it. I did not run him down on the way out, which I believe in. I think if somebody's, there's no sense just, running somebody the riot, reading the riot act, just let them go and let them know this is not a good fit.
Yeah.
And customer complaint after customer complaint, we had this one project where he had stepped through a ceiling in somebody's house, and customer
He
was
didn't take the safety course.
yeah, no, and we had all ahead of time talked about how you need to set up planks and make sure we're not we're in somebody's attic. We don't want to be coming through the ceiling. So anyway, he goes through the ceiling. He call and I talked to him. I said, now, could this have been prevented, or how could this have been prevented? I have no idea how we could have prevented this. What was the response? Like, oh, we got a problem. And mistake after mistake, I'd draw a line. Here's where this needs to be cut, and 2 inches over.
Oh, no.
He's cutting another line. Anyway, mistake after mistake after mistake, and I realized, okay, this is what am I doing here? This is stupid. Like, let's he's not getting better.
No.
So I'm sorry, this isn't gonna work. And then the mistakes you hear about later start happening. This happened and that happened. And I told my wife, I said, honey, I think I haven't heard of a mistake in like 3 weeks. I think we're finally done with that. And then I got a call like 9 p.m. that evening, and this customer said something fell through our kitchen ceiling. And I'm thinking, we've been gone from that job for weeks. It happened to be this employee had hung this like steel fan in the attic and on a bungee cord, and it fell through their kitchen ceiling at like at 2 a.m. So anyway, point being,
skills test.
Yeah, skills test and fire fast. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, a little bit of a diversion there, but it can be incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And needlessly so.
Yeah.
It was very clear in the first day or two of like, this is not a good fit.
Yeah.
He needed a show. He needed to be a comedian somewhere, and he had amazing talent there. Like he had skills that most of the team didn't have. He was very humorous. Anyway, he was just misplaced.
Yeah.
So
in the wrong role.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're hiring somebody, how long should I, the contractor, expect for that person to be in the role before they can actually add lift to the team?
That piece about it is you have a great feeling about it. They are learning and excelling and doing important things in the first couple of days. But from a standpoint of like being able to just, I think maybe the distinction would be giving them ownership as opposed to really being glued to them and making sure that you're working together to define process and work through everything. This is 2 to 4 weeks, 6 weeks process before you're really able to say, okay, run with it. Because the premature handoff can be very, very detrimental. Like most handoffs are 1 to 2 days. Okay, Sally, you're my new office manager. Here's all the stuff. Here's where to find things. Call me up if you have any problems. 2 days, like 1 day into it.
Sure.
As opposed to being like, let's work through exactly what you're supposed to do. How is this situation handled? How is that situation handled? And that's time investment.
Yeah.
To your point. I mean, earlier of just being that's expense.
Right. Yeah. It's expensive to hire people because it's not just the cost, but you have to train them as well. You're spending time. And it kind of goes back to that first comment that we started off the episode with of like, hey, I need to be in the field, but I also have to train in the office. And I also have, so, he's right. There is a level of, you have to balance that for a little while. So make sure you spend the time hiring the right person up front.
Right. Make sure you're making a good investment.
Yeah.
Because you will be investing. Yeah. And it's that. And don't trust your gut instinct too much either. Being like, man, that person gives me a good feeling, because we've been wrong that way too. True. I mean, we had somebody recently where it was, probably a month into it. And I was still feeling something like, I don't know, like this is not really settled. But I was like, wow, they're really nice. So don't go too much off of personality. It's like, are they really owning the job? Are they really fulfilling what you need them to do?
Are they crushing it?
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, they have the skills and experience, and are they like able to do what you need them to do? Because sometimes it just seems like, I love this person. They're great to work with. And I have had those times where it's just like, wow, you're a fantastic person. We just don't have the skills yet. Yeah. And I don't want to be the one that helps you get them because it's too expensive. Yeah.
That's good. So wrapping it up, what are your final thoughts?
I think if you don't, going back to this kind of heartless, like if you don't know what you're doing before you hire that person, it's not gonna fix it by jumping in both feet, and you're still gonna be in the same kind of like funk that you were in before, where you're just like, what's going on here? I think really being able to recognize it might be a process issue you have down, where you're just bogged down with lots of poor processes, and it might not even be a hire that you need. It might just be the first step in all of this is saying, okay, let me identify. Maybe it's 2 hours a week that you hadn't been spending doing invoicing, and you're just like, I just need to make some time to keep up with some certain core tasks, identify what those things are, and kind of really define a role before you jump into it and say, okay, I've got a mess. Yeah. Somebody's not going to come into that situation as an office manager and just fix a mess. Yeah. But if you have it defined and you spend a little bit of time, even at the dilution of your ability to get stuff done in the field, taking the right priorities, I think that could really help. And then you can say, okay, now you can scale as a business and you can really take off, because that person needs to help you make money. Yeah. Office manager needs to facilitate you taking your business next level. And if that person's just helping you sort of just hang on for the ride and you're barely making as it is, your problem's not going away.
Yeah. So get your processes sorted out and then hire.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
And then one book that I think we referenced in episode 45, The When to Hire Your First Person, is it Liz Wiseman? That was her name. Her book's called Multipliers.
It's a good book.
And it's an audiobook. You can get an ebook or, order it online, obviously. And so that's a really great one if you haven't hired somebody before or led somebody before, or you have and you just want to get better. I think the best leaders, they multiply their team. They don't diminish their team. And
it's so easy to be what Liz refers to as an accidental diminisher. Of being like, I didn't mean to diminish it, but I am. Yeah. And being able to call that out. She does a phenomenal job in that book really of showing like all of these like practices maybe even have been modeled out. That maybe all the bosses you've had before were diminishers, and that was the examples you had. Being a boss was part of just not multiplying your team, not facilitating them all working together towards a common goal, and like, let's level up here. And anyway, it's a good read.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, guys, let us know what you thought of this episode. Leave some comments, like it, share it, and we'll see you back next time.